Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim and you're watching Turkiye Diplomacy. Tensions are escalating between Iran and Israel, where recent hours have seen intense military exchanges. Israeli airstrikes targeted Iran's nuclear and military sites, and Iran retaliated with ballistic missile and drone assaults on Israeli cities. The world is watching closely as both nations claim strategic gains amid rising casualties. Today, we'll discuss these critical developments, explore their global impact, and seek clarity in this conflict.
Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's very simple. We don't have to go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday told reporters he wanted what he called a, quote, real end to the nuclear dispute with Iran.
An end. A real end, not a ceasefire. An end. So something that will be...
The U.S. leader had pressed Iran to reach a deal to limit Tehran's nuclear program when Israel attacked the Islamic Republic last week, prompting Iran to fire hundreds of ballistic missiles and drones in response. Footage released by the Iranian Red Crescent Society on Tuesday showed what it described as its rescue workers attempting to free injured people from under the rubble of a damaged building in Tehran following an Israeli strike. Iranian officials have reported 224 deaths, mostly civilians, since Israel launched its air war last week. Israel said it concluded Iran was on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon. Its surprise attack has killed nearly the entire top echelon of Iran's military commanders and its leading nuclear scientists. A spokesperson for Iran's defense ministry on Tuesday said the allegation Iran was constructing a nuclear weapon was a lie and that Israel would be defeated. Meanwhile, in the northern Arab-Israeli city of Tamra, residents held a funeral for 4 women of the same family who were killed when an Iranian missile struck their home. Israel's military said some 24 people were killed and more than 647 were injured in Iranian attacks, with 35 missiles penetrating the defense shield and making direct hits. Israel has said it will punish Iran for striking Israeli civilians. Defense Minister Israel Katz on Tuesday warned the leader of Iran to remember what happened to former Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein, who was tried and executed after the fall of his regime. Israel's command of Iranian airspace leaves few obstacles in the way of its expanding bombardment, though experts say it will struggle to deal a knockout blow to deeply buried nuclear sites without the U.S. joining the attack. Later on Tuesday, Trump posted on social media that the U.S. knew where to locate Iran's leader and said, quote, "We are not going to take him out, kill, at least not for now." He added, quote, "Our patience is wearing thin."
Welcome back to the program. Anews editor Mustafa Kojakanar, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for hosting, Mama.
Mustafa, let's talk about what has happened in the last 24 hours. Now we're hearing that the United States, under the Trump administration, could be a part of this war, could be a part of these attacks which Israel has been conducting against Iran. Now, Mustafa, what are the latest updates and can we see the United States actually joining this war?
Omar, it is crystal clear that geopolitical tensions are rapidly and dangerously rising in the Middle East right now. Missile showdown between Israel and Iran has been continuing. As you know, last Friday, Israel launched unprecedented and major strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, military installations, and oil infrastructure. And since then, Iranian security forces have been retaliating against Israel's attacks. And it is clearly showing that both sides are in favor of ongoing conflicts in the region. On the other hand, regional and international stakeholders have been reacting to the geopolitical crisis between two arch rivals in the Middle East. Turkey is one of the most important countries calling for diplomacy and dialogue between two sides to deal with the ongoing security challenges in the region. On the other hand, some Western countries, United States in particular, are reiterating their strong support for Israel's so-called security demands in the region. On the other hand, Eurasian bloc, including Russia and China, are urgently calling for the cessation of the conflicts between Iran and Israel. And it is clearly showing that right now there are two blocs in the Middle East, and Western countries, I think, are increasing their pressure on Iran to reach a new nuclear deal with the United States. As you know, some analysts claim that maybe Israel will realize false flag operation to direct the United States into the conflicts with Iran. But I don't think that Israel needs that, because U.S. President Donald Trump is already in favor of joining Israel's military campaign against Iran. If the United States joins Israel's military campaign, I think we will see further conflicts and further escalation in the region. I hope that international community will find a common way or common sense to address the geopolitical challenges in the Middle East. Otherwise, maybe we will witness a wider regional war in the region.
Mustafa, don't you think this is a psychological warfare? Because when we talk about Israel's aerial power, we've seen so many jets over the past few days which have been bombing Iranian cities. There are F-35 jets which have been tearing apart residences and civilian areas in the capital, Tehran, as well. We saw that. Now, Mustafa, how can we, decide how strong Iran's military is against the Israeli military? Because we know about the Israeli forces. We've seen the devastation. We've seen the support from Western countries as well. They've been providing Israel with bombs, with airplanes, with fighter jets, and you name it, and the West is going to provide that to Israel. So how does that change the dynamics between in this conflict between Iran and Israel? Because obviously Israel is much more superior when it comes to aerial warfare.
Omar, it is obviously part of psychological warfare between Israel and Iran. Since the very beginning of the crisis, Israeli decision makers have been claiming air superiority over Iran. And we know that yesterday Iranians also claimed superiority over Israel. And it is clearly a part of psychological warfare between two arch rivals in the Middle East. On the other hand, Israeli decision makers reiterated their country's determination to totally eliminate Iran's nuclear program. As you know, Western countries have been accusing Iran of trying to acquire nuclear weapons. In the last 2 decades, Western decision makers have been claiming that Iran is in the nuclear threshold. But on the other hand, we know that Iran is part of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, and they already declared that they will not seek any nuclear weapon. And as you know, in 2003, United States launched strikes against Iraq under the pretext of mass destruction weapons. And right now, I think both Israel and the United States need to fabricate reasons to legitimize their military operations against Iran. And it is clearly showing that they are convincing the Western public opinion about Iran's nuclear ambition. On the other hand, as you know, Iran vows to defend itself against Israeli aggression in the region. But Israel has no capacity right now to totally destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, because some nuclear facilities established by Iran is underground, and Israel has no military capability to destroy them. And right now, Israeli decision makers desperately need American help to deal with the Iranian nuclear program. And as you know, only the United States as a bunker buster in its military inventory. And I think that this week maybe we will see United States operations against Iran's underground nuclear facilities, and it will clearly increase the geopolitical tensions in the region. Iran is trying to take new steps to deter the United States from joining the war in the region. As you know, Iran has control over Strait of Hormuz. Maybe they can close the Strait of Hormuz, and it will will put pressure on Western countries to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy to deal with the bilateral or multilateral challenges in the region. Iran is also considering the withdrawal from the NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it is clearly showing that both sides, including Iran and Israel, United States, they are in favor of ongoing clashes instead of prioritizing dialogue or diplomacy to find a common way or common sense in terms of de-escalating the already boiling geopolitical tensions in the Middle East.
Mustafa, yesterday Donald Trump departed for the United States from Canada. He left early from the G7 summit, which was being held in the country. Now, how do you look at that, that move and, the statement that he gave? He said that we're looking for something that is going to be bigger than a ceasefire. So is Donald Trump pursuing actual diplomacy, or is he siding with Israel?
Mar, as you mentioned, G7 nations gathered in Canada this week to exchange views on the regional and global security challenges. And US President Donald Trump left G7 summit early to chair a national security cabinet meeting in the United States. And yesterday he posted social media and he claimed that they know where Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei is hiding. And it is clearly showing that right now both the United States and Israel are in pursuit of regime change in Iran. As we also know that Israel's embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is taking aim at Iran's decision makers. And if they try to kill Ali Khamenei, they think that it will trigger a regime change in Iran. But on the other hand, some Western countries, including France, are criticizing attempts by Israel and the United States to kill Iran's supreme leader because they are against the regime change in Iran right now. G7 nations are also calling for dialogue and diplomacy to deal with the bilateral problems between Iran and Israel. But on the other hand, on the ground, we know that these nations are important contributors to Israel's military capabilities. They are still sending military equipment to Israel to make Israel be able to continue their military operations in the region. As you know, Israel is not only taking aim at Iran, they are also targeting Palestine, Syria, and Yemen. They are always taking aim at other countries' national sovereignty and territorial integrity in the region. And I think that United States will continue to support Israel's policies, ambitious geopolitical agenda in the region. And we know that many cabinet members within the Trump administration, they are strong supporters of Israel and its genocidal acts in the region. I hope that regional and international stakeholders will propose new mediation or facilitator efforts to bring both sides to the negotiating table. But at that, we are living in an anarchic international system, and anarchic international system requires self-help for states to survive in the international system. And the bottom line is that Iran will be supposed to defend itself against Israel or American aggression to keep the regime and to keep the country alive in the world politics.
Mustafa, like you just said, we're living in a very anarchic world, and there's anarchy, there are conflicts in this region as well. When we talk about the Iranian supreme leader, he yesterday stated that my life is not so valuable, but the religion of Islam is extremely valuable, and we have to defend that. And some other experts have also stated that at the end of the day, Israel is going to be the one which is going to ask for a ceasefire. So, and we can also see the statements made by Western countries. You just mentioned France and Germany and what their take has been on this entire conflict. And the G7 yesterday also issued a statement saying that Israel has the right to defend itself. Okay, I understand this, that Israel has the right to defend itself, but don't you think that Iran has the same right?
Umar, we know that there are many political reasons behind the recent confrontation between Iran and Israel. For the Israeli part, there are two reasons, I think, and one reason is the internal and domestic political dynamics within the country. We know that Israelis have been taking to the streets every weekend to frustrate, to explain, to express their frustration over Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet. On the other hand, there is ongoing corruption trial against Israel's embattled prime minister, and he knows that continued military operations across the Middle East are the only options to keep him politically alive in the country. On the other hand, the second reason is the security architecture in the Middle East. We know that Israel has nuclear weapons. Right now in the world, there are 9 nations having nuclear weapons. 5 of them are legitimate nuclear powers, and these countries are the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, and Russia. On the other hand, there are also 4 other nations having nuclear weapons, and they are India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel. Israel doesn't explain to the world public opinion that they have nuclear weapons, but it is a well-known secret by the international community, and they are always calling for denuclearization in Iran. But we know that Iran has no nuclear powers. They are, yes, enriching uranium and plutonium, but they don't declare that they have nuclear weapons. On the other hand, Western countries are also supporting for denuclearization in the region. But how can you legitimize your opinion about the denuclearization in the region? No one is opposing from Western countries against nuclear weapons in Israel, but they are opposing possible nuclear ambition by Iran. It is clearly showing the hypocrisy among Western countries. They are always pursuing their own national security interests in the region. I hope that right now it is up to Turkey to find a common way or common sense between the Western bloc and Iran, because we know that Turkey has been enjoying close relationships with both Iran and Western countries. Turkey is part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and next week there will be NATO summit in the Netherlands, Hague. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan will be expected to meet with their counterparts from NATO countries to discuss recent geopolitical challenges in the region. I think Turkey will bring the latest geopolitical situation in the Middle East to the table, and I hope that Western countries will take Turkey's security demands into the consideration if they want to see long-standing and sustainable peace and tranquility in the Middle East. Otherwise, we will witness a wider regional war in the region.
Masoud, don't you think this is like a battle between the East and the West? Because if you look at Iran, it has, it has had extremely good relations with countries in the East, for example, China, Pakistan, India, and Russia as well. We cannot forget Russia, or we cannot, cancel Russia from the equation. So, and Israel has been supported by the West, by the United States, by European countries. So don't you think that this is a war between the East and the West at the end of the day? And since you just mentioned, you said there's going to be a NATO summit in the Netherlands next week. So how would world leaders, clash over there? Do you think that they can find a diplomatic solution to this issue, or do you think that this is going to be an issue which will just exaggerate and it will exacerbate even further?
Well, it is crystal clear that there are right now 2 important blocs in the Middle East, and one bloc is the Western bloc, and the second one is the Eurasian bloc. But there is some difference between these 2 blocs. Yes, Western countries are reaffirming their strong support for Israel's so-called national security demands in the region. And Eurasian bloc is also reaffirming strong support for Iran's territorial integrity and political sovereignty. But the difference is that Western countries are militarily supporting Israel. But Eurasian bloc is only politically and diplomatically supporting Iran. We know that no country is sending military equipment to Iran to defend itself against Israel's attacks. But on the other hand, Israel has been taking a huge amount of military equipment from the Western countries, and it is clearly showing that Western bloc is in favor of continued military operations and geopolitical tensions in the region. On the other hand, Eurasian bloc is trying to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy to address the geopolitical challenges in the region. But as we mentioned, that Turkey is in the middle of these two blocs, because Turkey has been enjoying close relationship with both Western nations and Eurasian countries. Turkey, I think, will continue to take steps to call for dialogue and diplomacy between Iran and West. Maybe, as you know, Turkey has been hosting peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. Turkey, as a mediator or facilitator country in the world politics, I think will take new steps to bring conflicting sides to the same negotiating table. Maybe Turkey's capital Ankara or Turkey's financial or cultural capital Istanbul will host peace talks between Israel and Iran. But I don't think that Israel will be in favor of dialogue and diplomacy, because they are enjoying continued military operations in the region. They are always taking aim at other countries' political sovereignty and territorial integrity. Turkey will continue to prioritize dialogue and diplomacy, but I think that Israeli decision makers will continue to turn a blind eye to international criticism over its military campaigns across the Middle East.
Mustafa, thanks for that analysis. Now let's take a look at the latest developments and what has been happening between Iran and Israel over the past 24 hours. We'll be back in a few minutes.
He cuts an increasingly lonely figure. Iran's 86-year-old supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has lost his main military and security advisors to Israeli airstrikes. That's left holes in his inner circle and raised the risk of strategic errors, according to 5 people familiar with his decision-making. Among those killed were his main advisors from Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards, their commander Hossein Salami, aerospace chief Amir Ali Hajizadeh, who headed Iran's ballistic missile program, and spy master Mohammad Kazemi. They were part of an inner circle of 15 to 20 advisors, all characterized by their unwavering loyalty to Khamenei and the Islamic Republic. Khamenei makes the final decision on important matters, but he values advice, listens to diverse views, and often seeks more information, according to a source who attends the group's ad hoc meetings at his compound in Tehran. Khamenei was imprisoned before the 1979 revolution and maimed by a bomb attack before becoming leader in 1989. He has placed the Revolutionary Guards at the center of power. They answer to him personally, and he relies on them for internal security and regional strategy. Khamenei deployed the Guards and the affiliated Basij militia to quell national protests in 1999, 2009, and 2022. They've always managed to clamp down and restore state rule. But years of Western sanctions have caused widespread economic misery that analysts say could threaten internal unrest. Now the Guards' top ranks have been decimated at one of the most dangerous moments in the Islamic Republic's history. And Khamenei finds himself further isolated by the loss of key advisors in Iran's regional so-called axis of resistance. Last September, an Israeli airstrike on Lebanon killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, who was personally close to Khamenei. The 5 sources stress that other top political, economic and diplomatic advisors remain important and extend the supreme leader's reach across many domains. They also say his son Mojtaba has grown ever more central to Khamenei's process over the past 20 years.
Welcome back to the program. Now let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. Mustafa, we've been talking about the Israel-Iran issue. I also mentioned a while earlier how Israel has air superiority over Iran, right? And how Iran has been lacking all of that technological advancements that have been provided to Israel by the West. So Iran-Israel air war rages on. Again, Mustafa, we've been talking about what's been happening between the two countries, but I want to understand the Turkish point of view right now.
Omar, as you mentioned, that the Israeli preemptive attack against Iran's nuclear facilities and military installations last week demonstrated that Israel continues to persistently spread conflict across the Middle East. And we know that Israel's embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government is mobilizing the Zionist lobby in the Western countries to achieve the Middle Eastern countries' goals of plunging the region into the chaos. And as Daily Sabah's headlines indicate, that Iran-Israel air war rages on. And obviously, Turkey is an important part of the Middle East region. And since the very beginning of the crisis between Israel and Iran, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan have been in close contact with their counterparts from the regional countries or Western countries to discuss what can be done to de-escalate the rising geopolitical tensions between two arch rivals in the region. We know that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been always slamming Israel's military aggression in the region. Turkey has been warning that Israel's military ambition will yield negative results in terms of dragging the region into the chaos. And Turkish Foreign Minister also issued a written statement about the latest geopolitical developments in the region, and Ankara has been condemning Israel's preemptive strikes against Iran. It is clearly showing that Turkey is in favor of dialogue and diplomacy to deal with the bilateral, multilateral problems between Iran and Western countries, because we know that Turkey thinks that there will be no winners in continuing wars, and there will be no losers in just peace. And within this context, I think that Turkey will continue to take new steps and new initiatives to bring long-standing and sustainable peace and tranquility to the Middle East.
Mustafa, thank you for that analysis. Of course, we're going to monitor whatever happens. Now we're in the 6th day of this conflict, and we've been seeing how Iran and Israel have been attacking one another. They've been targeting civilians as well, nuclear facilities as well, and other military bases. Thanks for that analysis, Mustafa. Now let's take a look at Iran's nuclear facilities. Where are they, which have been attacked, and what will happen next in this news report.
Iran's nuclear program continues to be a focal point of international concern, with growing questions about its capabilities and intentions amid renewed regional tensions. Iran's nuclear infrastructure is spread across the country, with some of its most sensitive facilities built underground to protect them from potential airstrikes. The most prominent enrichment sites include Natanz and Fordow. Natanz houses thousands of centrifuges at both underground and above-ground plants. It is central to Iran's enrichment efforts, currently refining uranium up to 60% purity, a level close to weapons grade. Fordow offers Iran added protection against strikes. Despite a previous deal banning enrichment at this site, Iran now operates advanced centrifuges there, enriching uranium to high levels. Other important locations include Isfahan, home to conversion facilities and uranium metal production equipment, and Kadab, where a heavy water reactor under redesign could potentially produce plutonium if completed. The United States and the International Atomic Energy Agency believe Iran had a covert nuclear weapons program until 2003, which it later halted. Tehran denies ever seeking nuclear weapons, insisting its activities are peaceful. With talks on the nuclear program stalling and recent Israeli strikes on Iranian sites escalating tensions, the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions remains uncertain, posing a critical challenge for regional and global security.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now from the Pakistani capital is political analyst Javed Rana. Javed, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Javed, yesterday we were seeing that the Iranian parliament was drafting a bill to, leave the NPT, the non-proliferation treaty. What can we expect from such a move, Javed?
I think underlying impression and underlying optics that right now Tehran is trying to create is trying to send a message to the West, more particularly to Israel and USA, that Iran can come out of Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which means that Iran would not be under any obligation if it carries out any nuclear test or if it goes for any nuclear activities which under the IAEA laws and regulations was previously banned. My understanding is this is more like a gamble. Iran may or may not have a nuclear weapons, the possibility of which is that it doesn't have a weapon. All the reports which we have seen in the past from different international intelligence networks that do suggest that Iran was close to manufacturing nuclear warheads. But I think there is no credible report suggesting that Iran was possessing nuclear weapons. So I think that is an indicator towards that direction. And we should also not forget in 2003, North Korea had carried out nuclear tests, probably, and then it had come out from the NPT. And I think that was a reason that because North Korea was clearly telling to the world that it is no longer under the obligations to pursue IAEA regulations and to pursue NPT's regulations. But in case of Iran, I mean, in North Korea had conducted tests and then had come out of the NPT. In case of Iran, Iran is trying to basically gamble on a situation where it wants to create optics that it has nuclear weapons and it can use it against Israel. And I think that is the reason that we are seeing the similar activities going on in the Iranian parliament.
Javed, these are activities that we saw in previous decades as well, how the United States targeted Iraq by saying that Iraq possesses weapons of mass destruction. And now, Israel has also said that Iran intends to provide nuclear weapons to the Houthis, which is baseless. These things are, there are no facts or statistics behind such statements. But Javed, I want to ask you about the American reaction, because, we've been seeing that the U.S. has repositioned its military assets. For example, the USS Nimitz and Carl Vinson, these warships have been moved to the Middle East. So what sort of a reaction can we expect from countries in the Middle East and from the wider region?
I think the United States has brought its pressure tactics to the tipping point. I think 2 or 3 months ago, they brought 52 bombers, and these bombers were based at some Indian oceans, some bases in the Indian Oceans, and that was also a pressure tactic, which suggesting that USA may use 52 bombers to basically dismantle Iran's nuclear program. And then at the same time, US was opening up the negotiations successfully with Iran. And I think now, since Iran is already under apartheid state Israel's aggression, we have witnessed that the pressure tactics have changed. Its form have further changed. It has further intensified. I think with these warships in the region, again, it is an attempt to bring Iran under further pressure to go for a negotiated settlement. And by a negotiated settlement, it means to surrender its nuclear program altogether. So far, apartheid Israel has damaged Iran's nuclear installations, Iran's nuclear sites, but it has not completely dismantle Iran's nuclear program, which means it has delayed Iran's ability to manufacture nuclear warheads, and it has not altogether eliminated the very ability of Iran to manufacture nuclear warheads and then go for some kind of a enrichment at a higher level. So I think in that context, these pressure tactics are being used. My understanding is that USA is still reluctant to launch a massive attack on Iran. Just a couple of minutes ago, before this particular interview, I was hearing Iranian official spokesman, and he was giving warning that if the Americans get involved in this war, there would be full-scale war in the region. And he was clearly reluctant to point out that will Iran attack at the military basis of USA in the Gulf region, and indirectly he was hinting on that this war would not only would engulf this entire region, but also would go beyond it. So all I'm saying is that Iran is basically in a very bad position. But at the same time, we have to see the reality on ground that at a time when there is no outside help to Iran, at least there is no tangible, visible, meaningful help coming to Iran from anywhere from the world. I have not seen any evidence where Russia would be providing or supplying weapons. I have not seen any evidence that China is providing any help. I think Iran is largely dependent onto its missiles technology, on more particularly on ballistic missiles technology, and so far it has fired more than 400 missiles attacks inside apartheid Israel. And I think the kind of the damage that it has caused in Israel, that is also creating very tough conditions for people inside apartheid state. So I think it is not that easy for the apartheid state to sustain this war. So the very reason that Americans are putting a lot of pressures, basically, and then this pressure is also now coming from many of the European countries so far, so-called G7 club. That is essentially an indicator that Iran would surrender. I don't think that is a likely scenario. Going by the history of Iran, Iran has only conceded to the genuine Islamic revolution when Islam was revived 14 centuries ago, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, came. And I think from there onwards, Iran not has accepted hegemony of any other non-Muslim, any other nation. So I think in a broader context, given the fact that Iran's territorial depth is huge, it is a bigger, 72 times bigger than the size of apartheid Israel. It has the capacity to sustain a war. Also, given the fact that Iran has stored, if not tens of thousands, then at least thousands of the missiles in different locations in the mountainous regions, I think they can continue this war. So Iran's nuclear program has already been compromised. Israel may dismantle it in days to come. But expecting that there would be regime change operation in Tehran, I think probably I would say the apartheid Israel and its Zionist extremist fascist leaders, they are living in fool's paradise. That is the most unlikely to happen.
Javed, just very briefly, tell me about the G7 statement. The G7 stated that Israel has the right to defend itself. And, these sort of statements are, statements that we've already expected, and we know how the West reacts when it comes to Israel. And also tell me about when Trump said that they're going to, look for something that's bigger than a ceasefire. So what do these statements clarify?
I think this G7 countries, when they say that Israel has right to defend itself, I don't understand why Iran doesn't have that right to defend itself when it came under Israel's aggression, because there was no ultimatum of war. This is again a deviation from the international law. What Donald Trump has said, that he's looking for something beyond ceasefire. Basically, he wants a permanent solution, and that solution includes that there would be zero enrichment. And that is something Iranians are not going to accept. So I don't foresee any scenario where Iran would be surrendering its nuclear program altogether. I think that is that is the clear agenda of the President Donald Trump. The Jewish lobby in Washington is putting a lot of pressure on him to go for a war. But I think Donald Trump does understand that means that it's tens of thousands of soldiers, at least 40 to 50,000 soldiers, and it's all military bases in the Gulf region could possibly come under attack.
Javed, thank you for that analysis and for joining us on the program once again. Mustafa, thanks to you as well for your analysis. Now, in the coming few days, let's see how the situation develops. And, Mustafa, just some final words from you. How are you looking at this? Do you think that we can get a solution in the next few days?
I don't think that the geopolitical tensions will be de-escalated by Israel or Western countries. I think that the United States is set to join Israel's military campaigns against Israel because, as you know, since his first presidency, Donald Trump has been pursuing a tough stance and maximum pressure campaign against Iran. And since the very beginning of the crisis between Israel and Iran, Trump has been reaffirming United States' unwavering support for Israel's so-called security demands in the region. I don't think that we can count on United States' so-called efforts to bring long-standing peace and stability to the Middle East. As you know, Trump came to the power in January, and at that time there were two important geopolitical challenges in the world politics. One of them is Israel's military campaign against innocent Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip, and the second one is the war between Ukraine and Russia. And Trump promised to put an end to these conflicts within 24 hours. But 5 months have passed, and right now the war is spreading to the Middle East. I don't think that U.S. President Donald Trump is be able to deliver his foreign policy promises. And if the United States joins Israel's military campaign against Iran, I think the regional war will spread to other parts of the world. I think that it is up to Turkey right now to de-escalate the geopolitical tensions between Western Bloc and Eurasian nations.
Mustafa, thanks for that analysis. We'll continue to monitor the developments here on Turkey's diplomacy.
You're welcome, Omar.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.